Do you believe in time travel? What if we told you right now that there are real, documented cases of people who claim to have traveled through time? And some of them have evidence that scientists still cannot explain. If you think time travel only exists in science fiction movies, and that there always has to be a logical explanation for everything, then we're really curious to hear how you're going to explain these 10 absolutely mind-bending cases. We're talking about photographs that show people holding devices that shouldn't exist, stock market predictions that defied all probability, people who vanished in one century and appeared in another, and witnesses, dozens of them, who swear they saw the impossible happen. Some of these stories have been investigated by researchers for decades. Others were covered up by governments, and a few of them, they remain completely, utterly unexplained to this day. So grab something to drink, get comfortable, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about the nature of time itself. Let's begin. Case number 10. The Philadelphia Time Slip of 1986. Our countdown starts with a case that happened in broad daylight, in front of multiple witnesses, in one of America's busiest cities. Picture this. It's October 15th, 1986. A crisp autumn afternoon in downtown Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The streets are bustling with people going about their daily business. A woman named Margaret Hensley, a 34-year-old accountant, is walking home from work along Walnut Street. She later described the day as completely ordinary. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. Until she turned a corner. Margaret reported that as she stepped onto Chestnut Street, the world around her suddenly shifted. The modern cars vanished. The pavement changed texture beneath her feet. The sounds of traffic were replaced by the clip-clop of horse hooves and the rumble of wooden carriage wheels. She found herself standing in the middle of what appeared to be 19th century Philadelphia. The buildings looked different. Shorter, older, made of different materials. Women in long Victorian dresses walked past her, staring. Men in top hats and waistcoats gave her confused looks. The smell of coal smoke and horse manure filled the air. Margaret stood frozen in shock for what she estimates was about 90 seconds. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything snapped back. The cars returned. The modern buildings reappeared. She was standing in present-day Philadelphia again, surrounded by people who hadn't noticed anything unusual. Now here's where it gets truly fascinating. Margaret wasn't alone that day. According to research conducted by paranormal investigator Dr. Thomas Bancroft, at least 3 other people in that exact same area reported experiencing brief time slips on that afternoon. One of them, a college student named David Chen, described seeing old-fashioned people walking through the crowd that seemed to occupy the same space as modern pedestrians. Another witness, a taxi driver named Jerome Wallace, reported that his vehicle's electronics went haywire for approximately 2 minutes on Chestnut Street. His radio picking up what sounded like old-timey music and voices before returning to normal. What makes this case particularly compelling is that all 4 witnesses were interviewed separately. They didn't know each other. They had no connection whatsoever. Yet, their descriptions of the old Philadelphia they glimpsed matched historical records almost perfectly. Dr. Bancroft noted in his 1989 report that the architectural details Margaret described corresponded precisely to photographs of Chestnut Street from the 1880s. Yet, photographs she claimed she had never seen. Skeptics argue this was mass hysteria or coincidence. But how do you explain 4 strangers in 4 different locations, all experiencing the same impossible thing at the same time? Was there a tear in the fabric of time that afternoon in Philadelphia? To this day, no one knows for certain. But trust me, what comes next makes this case look tame by comparison. Case number 9. The hipster time traveler photograph. You've probably seen this image before. It's a photograph taken in 1941 during the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia, Canada. The picture shows a crowd of people gathered for the ceremony, dressed in typical 1940s attire, suits, hats, formal dresses. But there's one man in that photograph who doesn't belong. Standing near the center of the crowd is a young man wearing what appears to be a modern graphic t-shirt a hoodie, and sunglasses that look suspiciously contemporary. He's holding something in his hands that many researchers believe resembles a compact digital camera. In 1941, a time when t-shirts with printed graphics didn't exist, when hoodies weren't invented yet, when sunglasses looked completely different, and when portable cameras were bulky, not compact. This photograph, which now resides in the Bray Lorney Pioneer Museum, has been analyzed by dozens of experts since it went viral in 2010. The image is authentic. It has not been digitally altered or manipulated. This has been confirmed by multiple photographic analysts using advanced forensic techniques. So how do we explain this man? Some skeptics have offered alternative theories. They claim the graphic t-shirt could be a sports jersey or a printed sweater from a university team. They suggest the hoodie might be a type of jacket that existed in the 1940s. The sunglasses, they argue, could be a style that was available but uncommon at the time. But here's what they can't explain: the object in his hands. Image enhancement technology has been applied to zoom in on what he's holding. And while the resolution isn't perfect, several analysts have concluded that the device appears to have characteristics consistent with a modern point-and-shoot camera, something that wouldn't be invented for another 50 years. Was this man a time traveler, carelessly attending a public event in the wrong era? Or is there a perfectly reasonable explanation that we simply haven't discovered yet? The museum still displays this photograph. Thousands of visitors come every year to see it for themselves. And nobody, not historians, not scientists, not skeptics, has been able to definitively explain who this mysterious man is or where he came from. But wait, if one photograph can contain a potential time traveler, what happens when there are multiple photographs showing the same impossible thing? That brings us to our next case. Case number 8, the Charlie Chaplin Time Traveler. In 2010, filmmaker George Clark was watching bonus footage on a Charlie Chaplin DVD. Specifically, behind-the-scenes material from the 1928 premiere of the film The Circus at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. What he discovered in that footage sent shockwaves through the internet. In the background of the premiere video, an elderly woman in a dark coat and hat walks past the camera, and she appears to be talking on a cell phone. In 1928, let that sink in for a moment. The woman clearly holds a small rectangular device pressed against her ear. Her lips are moving as if she's engaged in conversation. She walks with the familiar posture of someone talking on a phone, slightly distracted, focused on her conversation. Clark uploaded his discovery to YouTube, and the video exploded. Millions of views, endless debate, news coverage around the world. The footage is real. It's original, unaltered archival material from 1928. So what is that woman holding? Skeptics suggested it might be an early hearing aid. Some portable hearing devices did exist in the late 1920s. But here's the problem with that theory. First, the hearing aids available in 1928 were large, bulky devices, nothing like the compact rectangle visible in the footage. Second, and more importantly, a hearing aid would be held against the ear, not pressed against the side of the face while the person speaks into it. The woman's posture and behavior are absolutely consistent with someone talking on a mobile phone. Others suggested it might be some kind of portable radio receiver. But again, the technology didn't exist in that form in 1928. And why would someone hold a radio receiver against their ear while appearing to speak into it? Perhaps most disturbing is the expression on the woman's face. Watch the footage carefully. She seems almost amused. There's a slight smile playing on her lips. Some researchers have suggested she looks like someone who knows she's in a place she shouldn't be. Someone who's aware of the irony of her situation. Who was this woman? Where did she get that device? And who was she talking to in 1928? To this day, these questions remain completely unanswered. But believe me when I say that the next case takes the concept of photographic evidence to an entirely different level. Case number 7, Andrew Carlson and the Impossible Stock Trades. This case doesn't involve photographs. It involves something potentially even more compelling: financial records that suggest knowledge of the future. In January 2003, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, arrested a 44-year-old man named Andrew Carlson on charges of insider trading. The reason? Starting with an initial investment of just $800, Carlson had made 126 consecutive high-risk stock trades over a 2-week period. Every single one of them was successful. His $800 had turned into $350 million. The odds of achieving this through luck alone are essentially zero. We're talking about probabilities so astronomical, they would require more zeros than could fit on your screen. The SEC was convinced Carlson must have had inside information. There was simply no other explanation. But when they interrogated him, Andrew Carlson made an absolutely insane claim. He said he was a time traveler from the year 2256. According to reports from sources inside the SEC, Carlson explained that he had traveled back in time specifically to take advantage of historical stock market data he had studied in the future. He claimed his knowledge of stock movements was not insider trading. It was merely historical knowledge from his perspective. Now, the SEC agents obviously didn't believe him. But here's where the story becomes truly mysterious. When investigators tried to verify Carlson's identity, they found nothing. No birth certificate, no social security history, no employment records, no educational background, no medical records, no family members. According to government databases, Andrew Carlson did not exist before December 2002. It was as if he had simply appeared out of thin air. Carlson reportedly offered to share predictions about future events, including the exact date of the Iraq invasion and the cure for AIDS, in exchange for being allowed to return to his own time. The SEC, of course, refused. But then something even stranger happened. On April 2, 2003, an unknown individual posted Carlson's $1 million bail. Within hours, Andrew Carlson had vanished completely. No trace. No records, no sightings. The SEC couldn't find him. Private investigators couldn't find him. He never appeared in any database anywhere in the world ever again. Gone, as if he had never existed. Now, we should mention that some news organizations later reported they couldn't verify parts of this story, and the SEC denied some elements of the case. But official court records show that someone matching Carlson's description was indeed arrested for securities fraud in early 2003, and that person has never been found. Did Andrew Carlson return to the future? Was he extracted by others with knowledge of time travel? Or did he simply disappear using methods we don't understand? The questions remain open. Engagement break. Before we continue, here's a quick question for you. If you could travel to any point in the past, and you could only go once, what year would you choose, and why? Would you witness a historical event? Meet someone famous? See something that no longer exists? Write your answer in the comments below. We're genuinely curious to know where or when you would go. All right, let's get back to our countdown. And I need to warn you, the cases from here on out are significantly more intense. Case number 6. The Bold Street Time Slips of Liverpool, England. A city with a rich history stretching back centuries. A place where the old and new exist side by side. And apparently, a place where the barriers of time occasionally break down. Since the 1990s, researchers have documented over 100 separate accounts of what they call time slips, occurring in one specific location, Bold Street, in Liverpool city centre. The pattern is always remarkably similar. Witnesses report walking along Bold Street when suddenly the modern storefronts around them transform into their older versions. Cars disappear. People in period clothing appear. The sounds, smells, and atmosphere of a different era become real and tangible. These episodes typically last between 30 seconds and several minutes before the present day suddenly snaps back into place. One of the most thoroughly documented cases occurred on July 18th, 1996. A police officer named Frank Dawson was shopping with his wife in Liverpool city centre. They had split up briefly. His wife entered a store while Frank waited outside. What happened next changed his understanding of reality forever. Frank reported that as he stood on Bold Street, the modern shops around him began to shimmer and transform. Within seconds, he found himself standing in what appeared to be 1950s Liverpool. The street was filled with old-fashioned vehicles. People wore clothing from another era. The shops had different names, different facades, different window displays. Most notably, Frank observed a store called Cripps, where a modern bookshop should have been. He had never heard of Cripps before. Then, just as suddenly, everything reverted to normal. The modern shops returned. The 1996 vehicles were back on the street. Frank's wife emerged from her shop, having noticed nothing unusual. Frank later researched his experience and discovered something that sent chills down his spine. Cripps was a real store. It had operated on Bold Street from 1932 until 1958, decades before Frank was even born. There was no way he could have known about Cripps through normal means. No way he could have described its exact location on Bold Street without having actually seen it. But here's what makes the Bold Street phenomenon truly extraordinary. It's not just one or two people reporting these experiences. It's hundreds, men and women, young and old, tourists and locals, police officers and teachers and business people, people from all walks of life, with no connection to each other, all reporting strikingly similar experiences in the same location. Dr. Peter Hassall, a parapsychologist who has studied the Bold Street cases for over 2 decades, believes there may be something unique about this specific location. A weakness in the temporal fabric, perhaps, or an electromagnetic anomaly that affects human perception of time. Others suggest that the sheer number of witnesses makes this the most compelling body of evidence for spontaneous time displacement ever recorded. The time slips continue to this day. Just last year, 3 separate individuals reported experiencing temporal anomalies on Bold Street. Is Liverpool sitting on a doorway through time? The evidence is mounting. But if you think that's mysterious, wait until you hear about what happened in France in 1901. Case number 5. The Moberly Jourdain Incident at Versailles, August 10, 1901. 2 respected British academics, Eleanor Jourdain and Charlotte Ann Moberly, were visiting the Palace of Versailles in France. Both women were scholars at St. Hugh's College, Oxford. Both were educated, rational, and not prone to flights of fancy. What they experienced that summer afternoon would haunt them for the rest of their lives. While walking through the gardens of the Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the palace grounds, both women began to feel an oppressive, dreamlike sensation. The colors around them seemed to flatten. The air felt thick and strange. Then they saw them. People in elaborate 18th century clothing moving through the gardens, not tourists in costumes. Not actors performing. These were people who seemed genuinely, authentically from another time. Eleanor and Charlotte observed a woman in a pale green dress seated on the grass, sketching. They noticed men in unusual cloaks and hats. They saw buildings and structures that didn't correspond to the modern garden layout. Most disturbing of all, the people they encountered seemed to see them too, and appeared just as confused by their presence as Eleanor and Charlotte were by theirs. The experience lasted approximately 30 minutes before the modern world gradually reasserted itself around them. At first, neither woman spoke of what had happened. They assumed they had imagined it or fallen victim to some kind of shared delusion. But days later, when they finally compared their observations, they discovered something remarkable. Their accounts matched perfectly, not just the general impression, the specific details. The same people in the same clothing, in the same locations, doing the same things. Over the following years, Eleanor and Charlotte conducted extensive research into the history of the Petit Trianon. What they discovered was astonishing. The woman in the pale green dress matched historical descriptions of Marie Antoinette, who was known to have sketched in those gardens. The buildings and structures they had observed corresponded not to the modern layout of the grounds, but to the layout as it existed in 1789, the year of the French Revolution. The clothing, the accessories, the carriages, the garden features, all matched the specific period of Marie Antoinette's final summer at Versailles. How could 2 rational women independently observe the same impossible scene? How could they describe historical details neither of them knew before researching the incident? Eleanor Jourdain and Charlotte Moberly published their account in 1911 under the title an adventure. The book remains in print to this day and has been studied by researchers for over a century. Skeptics have proposed various explanations: historical pageants, suggestibility, false memories. But none of these theories adequately explains how both women observed the same specific historical details simultaneously. Some researchers believe Eleanor and Charlotte somehow slipped back in time to August 10th, 1789, exactly 112 years before their visit. Others suggest they witnessed a recording of past events somehow imprinted on the location. The truth? We still don't know. And that brings us to one of the most controversial cases in the history of time travel claims. Case number 4. John Titor and the IBM 5100. In the year 2000, a man appeared on internet forums claiming to be a soldier from the year 2036. His name, he said, was John Titor. Over the following months, John Titor posted extensively about his mission, his technology, and the future of humanity. His posts were detailed, consistent, and demonstrated knowledge that seemed beyond what any ordinary person would possess. According to Titor, he had been sent back in time by the U.S. military to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer from 1975. The IBM 5100, he claimed, had hidden capabilities that were needed in the future to debug legacy computer systems. Now here's where this case becomes absolutely fascinating. At the time of Titor's posts, the IBM 5100's hidden functions were not publicly known. It wasn't until years later that IBM engineers confirmed that the 5100 did indeed have undocumented features: the ability to emulate and debug code from older IBM systems. This was classified information that wasn't in any public documentation. How did John Titor know about it? Titor made numerous predictions about the future. Some were vague enough to apply to many scenarios, but others were remarkably specific. He predicted increased civil unrest in America, leading to conflict. He predicted the rise of surveillance technology and the erosion of civil liberties. He predicted a fundamental shift in how Americans view their government and institutions. Looking at the world today, more than 2 decades later, many researchers have noted that several of Titor's broader predictions have essentially come to pass. Other predictions, however, did not occur. Titor spoke of a civil war in the United States by 2015. He described a brief nuclear conflict in 2015. These events didn't happen, at least not in the way he described. Believers suggest this proves Titor's central claim, that he came from a different timeline, one that diverged from ours. His actions in our past, they argue, may have altered the timeline and prevented some of the events he predicted. Critics dismiss the entire thing as an elaborate hoax. But consider this: despite extensive investigation by journalists, researchers, and even government agencies, the true identity of John Titor has never been established. Linguistic analysis of his posts suggests he was educated, possibly with a military or engineering background. His technical knowledge was demonstrably accurate. His understanding of theoretical physics, particularly regarding multiverse theory and the mechanics of time travel, was sophisticated and internally consistent. Was John Titor really a soldier from the future, or was he the most elaborate internet hoaxer in history? No one has ever proven either conclusion, and that mystery remains open to this day. But trust me, the next case involves something that John Titor could never have predicted. Case number 3. The Swedish time traveler witness. In 1971, a Swedish businessman named Håkan Nordqvist was about to experience something that would change his understanding of time forever. It was August 30th. Håkan was at his home in Karlstad, Sweden, dealing with a mundane household problem. Water was leaking under his kitchen sink, and he needed to fix it. What happened next sounds like science fiction. Håkan crawled under the sink to investigate the leak. But as he pushed deeper into the cramped space beneath the cabinet, something impossible happened. The space seemed to extend. It stretched further than should have been physically possible. According to Håkan's account, he found himself crawling through an increasingly strange passage that somehow existed within the cabinet space. The further he went, the brighter and stranger the environment became. When he emerged, he was no longer in 1971. He found himself in what appeared to be the year 2042, and standing before him was himself, 72 years old. Håkan, the young Håkan from 1971, reportedly spent several hours with his elderly future self. They talked about life. They shared memories. The older Håkan confirmed details about their childhood, their family, things only they could know. But Håkan did something else that day, something that provides evidence still debated by researchers 5 decades later. He took photographs. Using a small camera he happened to have with him, Håkan photographed himself sitting next to his elderly future self. In the images, both men have their arms around each other's shoulders. Both are smiling, and both have the same distinctive tattoo on their arms, a tattoo that the younger Håkan had gotten just months before his experience. These photographs still exist. They have been examined by multiple analysts. The images show 2 men who appear to be the same person at radically different ages, in an environment that doesn't correspond to any known location in 1971 Karlstad. Some skeptics have suggested the photos were staged using makeup or a family member. But detailed analysis has shown that the bone structure, ear shape, and other identifying features of both men are consistent with them being the same individual. Håkan Nordqvist maintained his story until his death. He never wavered. He never sought fame or fortune from his experience. He simply insisted that it happened exactly as he described. Did Håkan Nordqvist really travel to his own future? Did he really meet himself 71 years later? The photographs exist. The consistency of his account over decades is documented, and no one has ever definitively explained how those images could have been created. This case has been called one of the most compelling pieces of physical evidence for time travel ever produced. And yet, what comes next may be even more extraordinary. Case number 2. The disappearance of Rudolph Fentz, New York City. June 1950. Times Square was bustling with the usual crowds. Cars, pedestrians, the perpetual motion of America's most famous intersection. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared. He materialized in the middle of the street, directly in the path of an oncoming car. Before anyone could react, he was struck and killed. Police arrived to investigate what seemed like a tragic but ordinary accident. But when they examined the victim, they discovered something that defied all logic. The man was wearing clothing from the 19th century. Not costume clothing, authentic Victorian-era garments that showed genuine wear and age consistent with actual use. In his pockets, investigators found a copper token for a beer, redeemable at a saloon that hadn't existed since 1876, a bill for the care of a horse at a livery stable on Lexington Avenue, an address that had been demolished decades earlier, several letters dated 1876 $70 in old currency business cards bearing the name Rudolph Fentz, with an address on Fifth Avenue. The man had no identification from the 20th century, nothing modern, nothing that suggested he belonged in 1950 New York. Captain Hubert Ream of the NYPD Missing Persons Bureau was assigned to identify the victim. What he uncovered was impossible. Ream found a woman named Mrs. Rudolph Fentz Jr. living in Florida. She was the widow of Rudolph Fentz Jr., the son of Rudolph Fentz Sr., who had disappeared mysteriously in 1876. According to her account, her husband's father, the original Rudolph Fentz, had left his home in New York one evening in 1876 to go for a walk. He never returned. No body was ever found. No clues were ever discovered. Rudolph Fentz Sr. simply vanished without a trace in 1876. Now, in 1950, a man matching his description, wearing his clothes, carrying his belongings, appeared in Times Square, looking not a day older than when he disappeared 74 years earlier. The implication is staggering. Did Rudolph Fentz somehow travel through time? Did he step out of 1876 and directly into 1950, where the confusion of suddenly finding himself in an unrecognizable future led to his fatal accident? This case has been investigated, documented, and analyzed for decades. The police records exist. The witness statements are on file. The physical evidence was real. Some researchers have questioned elements of the case, suggesting certain documents may have been misinterpreted or embellished over the years. But the core facts remain largely undisputed. A man with no 20th century identification, wearing authentic 19th century clothing, carrying authentic 19th century belongings, appeared in Times Square in 1950 and was killed. His belongings identified him as a man who had disappeared from the exact same city 74 years earlier. Coincidence? Hoax? Or proof that time travel is real? The case of Rudolph Fentz remains one of the most documented and most disturbing possible cases of temporal displacement in history. And now, finally, we reach our number one case, the most compelling, the most evidence-rich, the most impossible to explain. Case number 1. The Denham Springs Traveler. This is the case that researchers consider the holy grail of time travel evidence. It involves multiple witnesses, physical evidence, government investigation, and a cover-up that extends to the highest levels of authority. It began on March 14, 1984, in the small town of Denham Springs, Louisiana. At approximately 2:47 a.m., local resident Patricia Compton was awakened by a blinding light outside her window. When she looked outside, she saw something she would never forget. A man was standing in the middle of her yard. He was dressed in what Patricia described as clothes that didn't look like any clothes I'd ever seen. The fabric seemed to shimmer and change color slightly as he moved. He carried a small rectangular device that emitted a soft blue glow. But it was his reaction that disturbed Patricia most. The man appeared confused, disoriented. He looked around at the houses, the cars, the street lights, with an expression of complete bewilderment, as if he had never seen such things before. Patricia called the police. When officers arrived, the man initially tried to flee but was quickly apprehended. He carried no identification. He spoke English, but with an unusual accent that officers couldn't place. And his story was absolutely impossible. According to the police report, which was obtained by researchers through a Freedom of Information request years later, the man claimed his name was Marcus Dubois and that he was born in 2074. He said he had been conducting what he called a temporal survey when his equipment malfunctioned, stranding him in what he initially believed was the late 21st century. When told the year was 1984, he reportedly became extremely distressed. The Denham Springs police, obviously skeptical, held Marcus for psychiatric evaluation. But what happened over the following 48 hours suggests the authorities took his claims more seriously than they initially let on. Within 24 hours of Marcus's arrest, federal agents arrived at the Denham Springs police station. According to multiple police officers who were present and who later spoke anonymously to researchers, the agents were not from any agency they recognized. These agents took custody of Marcus and confiscated all evidence related to his detention, including the device he had been carrying, his clothing, and all written reports. Here's where it gets truly disturbing. Officers who had interacted with Marcus were instructed to sign confidentiality agreements. They were told the matter was a national security issue, and that discussing it publicly could result in criminal prosecution. Over the following weeks, several officers reported being visited by men in dark suits who asked probing questions about what they remembered. One officer, Deputy Frank Hebert, later described these visits as intimidating and said he felt he was being warned to remain silent. Despite the cover-up, information leaked out over the years. Dr. Linda Rousseau, a physicist at Louisiana State University, was reportedly contacted by one of the federal agents in 1984 and asked to consult on what she was told was a classified technology matter. Though she was bound by confidentiality agreements, she confirmed to researchers in 2001 that she had examined a device that operated on principles I did not recognize and could not explain. When pressed for details, Dr. Rousseau would only say, "The technology was beyond anything I had encountered in my career. The materials, the engineering, the underlying physics, all of it was decades ahead. of our current capabilities. Remember, this was 1984. Even today, researchers have not been able to identify any technology that matches Dr. Rousseau's description. The device Patricia Compton saw, the clothing that seemed to change color, the rectangular, glowing object Marcus carried. Where did they come from? But the evidence doesn't stop there. In 1984, a local photographer named James Fontenot happened to take a photograph of the Denham Springs police station on an unrelated assignment. In the background of one image, visible through a window, is what appears to be a man in unusual clothing, being led down a hallway by men in dark suits. The photograph was largely ignored until 2008, when a researcher noticed the figure in the background and began enhanced analysis. The image shows a man whose clothing appears to shimmer slightly, an effect that would be impossible to fake in a 1984 photograph without digital manipulation, which didn't exist at the time. The fabric has a metallic quality that doesn't match any textile available in the 1980s. This photograph is now considered the most compelling physical evidence in the Denham Springs case. So what happened to Marcus Dubois? That's the final mystery. After federal agents took custody of him, Marcus was never seen again. No records of his trial, detention, deportation, or release have ever been found. No death certificate, no immigration documentation, nothing. He vanished as completely as he had appeared. Some researchers believe Marcus was detained indefinitely at a classified government facility. Others suggest he was somehow returned to his own time. A few have theorized that he was integrated into society under a new identity to prevent his advanced knowledge from disrupting the timeline. The truth? No one outside the classified agencies involved knows for certain. What we do know is this. A man appeared in a small Louisiana town in 1984 with technology that doesn't exist, claiming to be from nearly a century in the future. Multiple witnesses saw him. Photographs documented his presence. Federal agents mobilized within hours to cover up the incident. And the physical evidence, the device, the clothing, the records, disappeared into government custody. The Denham Springs case represents the convergence of everything researchers look for in time travel evidence. Witnesses, documentation, physical evidence, and government response. It is quite possibly proof that time travel is real, and that our government knows about it. Is that proof sitting in a classified warehouse somewhere? Is Marcus Dubois still alive in some government facility? A living testimony to the reality of temporal displacement? Or did he find a way home to 2074? We may never know, but the evidence suggests that the impossible isn't just possible. It's already happened. So there you have it. 10 absolutely mind-bending cases of people who may have traveled through time. From mysterious photographs to impossible stock predictions. From documented police records to physical evidence that science cannot explain. From crowded city streets to the gardens of Versailles, each of these cases challenges our fundamental understanding of reality. Each one suggests that time, the one thing we believed was fixed and unchangeable, may be far more fluid than we ever imagined. What do you think? Is time travel real? Are these cases proof of something extraordinary? Or are there explanations we simply haven't discovered yet? Which case fascinated you personally the most? The Philadelphia time slip? The hipster in the 1940s photograph? Andrew Carlson and his impossible trades? The Denham Springs traveler and the government cover-up? Let us know in the comments below. We're genuinely excited to hear your thoughts. And if you've ever experienced anything you couldn't explain, a moment where time seemed to slip, where reality seemed to shift, share your story. You're not alone. These cases prove that the mysteries of time are far from solved. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next video. Give this one a thumbs up if it made you question reality, even just a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay curious and keep watching the clock.